Right, good evening, everyone. We are joined by Wei today and the Foundation Fit team. We're going to be going through a bike fit masterclass. So looking at the essentials of bike fit. So me and Wei have been working together for, well, we were working with Wei and his team here at Strength and Endurance for quite a while now, in a number of different capacities. And no, it's been great. But said the support that we've had from him and his team around the importance of bike mechanics, bike fit, everything else in between. It's one of the key aspects to all of your performances. So, guys, I'm going to pass the mic over. Any questions? Just drop them in the chat at the end. Anything we don't cover towards the end, then will certainly be getting in touch and getting in contact and going through some of those answers with you anyway. So, all right, guys, Wei, you can take over, my friend.
All right. Thanks very much, Chris. Thanks for organising. And yeah, absolutely. We want to give you guys as much value as possible tonight. And thank you for all your questions that you've been sending in. We've actually had so many questions that I'm definitely not going to be able to answer all of them tonight, which I kind of wanted to, but I'm just not going to be able to get through all of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to answer all of them via kind of email, or I'll probably put together maybe a few little videos or something like that at the end of the session. But anyone else who has questions tonight and wants any questions answered live as well, then please do ask them. Drop the questions into the chat box, and at the end you'll get a chance to kind of ask me some questions. And I'm going to be talking for about 30 minutes, and then that will give us another 30 minutes or so just to kind of blast through different questions and things like that. And the more participation, the merrier. So yeah, use that chat box, ask your questions, get your brain juices going, and we'll get into it. And also at the end of the session, if you stick around right to the end, then I'm going to have a special little offer for you guys as well. Hopefully that should help you guys out so we're figuring out your bike fit and things like that. So stick around to the end, and yeah, let's dive on in. So tonight, as the title suggests, is a masterclass about the essential 10-step process for you to achieve an effective bike fit. And this is the same process that we use day in, day out in our bike fit studio. And we want to give you this kind of process so that you can take it and use it and action it. Because actually, bike fit's not that complicated when you boil it down to the raw bare bones of it. And so you should actually be able to take a lot of information from this and actually action it. But if you are here today, you may well be a committed rider, but maybe you're struggling a little bit with the results that you want to get, or maybe you're also getting held back by persistent niggles or recurring injuries, things that just kind of keep recurring every time you get on the bike. Or maybe you're even just got that feeling that you're not getting as much out of your bike fit as possible. Or perhaps you're just here because you're curious, you just want to learn more, but you don't know at the moment, like how could a bike fit you? Or how could we help you out at the end of the day? So if any of this kind of resonates with you, then you're definitely in the right place. And I'm going to share our proven process. And we've fitted over 3,000 riders. So it definitely works. And we get lots and lots of lovely reviews from you guys all the time. And we work with both amateurs, professionals, all kinds of riding styles. So this covers road bikers, mountain bikers, gravel riders, triathlon, ultra distance commuters. Everyone's just on 2 wheels. Well, we've done 3 wheels as well, and 4 wheels even at some point. But yeah, this proven process works for all kinds of riding.
Wei, can I just jump in there? Can you share your screen with us? Is that okay? I think, are you sharing your screen?
Oh,
can you share it, please? Thanks, bud.
All right. Can everyone see that?
Perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Oh, you missed out on this lovely graphic with all the thousands of riders that we've been fitting. So here you go. Okay, and just to let you know, it does work at the very highest level. So we've been working with Colin Norris. Some of you guys will probably know him, be coached by him. We've worked really closely with him as well. He's actually retired now, but yeah, as a professional athlete, we worked closely with him. Actually, he was a really interesting case where he was really losing a lot of power, and he just couldn't finish the run off his triathlons. And he just couldn't work out like kind of why he just couldn't have that energy to finish the run. And we worked out that it was his bike position, and that was actually his bike position was holding him back from digesting his nutrition, and that was stopping him from getting all the energy that he needed. So we solved his bike position, and finally he could like kind of digest and actually eat on the bike, and then he could actually run. And he is a very, very fast runner. So his best Ironman split was like 2:41. So if anyone's been running marathons, then yeah, that's pretty fast for having swum and then biked. So yeah, pretty good stuff. We've also worked with Fran Brown just before she went to the Tokyo Olympics, para triathlete. And actually this slide's a little bit out of date now. She's now a multiple world champion in cycling. So I think she won like 6 gold medals at the Glasgow Games last year. So that was pretty crazy. But yeah, I had the pleasure of working with her kind of really early on, and kind of working with some really challenging stuff, but really fun stuff as well. So yeah, that's good stuff. But on a day-to-day level, and for the vast majority, although we love working with professional athletes and so on, we work with people like you. And again, bike fitting works across all different levels, whether you're, as Lane says here, like an expert rider or a novice rider. It's applicable. It does not discriminate. Like the biomechanics and the processes and the foundational principles behind like bike fit are applicable for all riders. And I think people are usually most surprised when they come through the process and just discover how much they learn about themselves. And this is really the core thing about kind of bike fitting. It's not so much a prescription, but really about kind of sharing knowledge and giving you that knowledge so that you can take that riding and take that knowledge and apply it in the best way possible. So who am I? Just quickly, I'm Wei. I run this company called Foundation Bike Fit. We've been bike fitting for a long time. I've been going since 2008, which seems like centuries ago now. And I've done a bit of everything. I've done everything. I've mountain biked, been a roadie, I've been racing, been a triathlete, also coached triathlon, but my kind of focus these days is more being a father to a young daughter. As parents out there will know, there's plenty of energy and time required going into children. And although I've done all kinds of kind of racing and so on, I'm just like an ordinary bike rider, just like you guys. The only podium that I've kind of topped is the Cargo Bike Hill Climb Championship in London. So pretty niche, but yeah, still got there and won a crate beer. So that was good fun. All right, and our bike fit studio, worth mentioning, we are based at the lovely London Olympic Velodrome. So it's a pretty amazing venue, really lucky to be there. It's the home of cycling in London, and what makes us really unique is that we have these road and mountain bike outdoor test circuits. So we can literally take you from the studio, and we can bike fit you in the studio, and we can take you outside and we can test you and watch you ride and see how you go around corners and actually feel the difference between where you were before and does your fit actually work in reality. And literally no other studio in the country can offer this. So we're in a pretty unique place, and this is kind of how we get really good results, because we can literally test some stuff out there. We also run some pretty cool stuff, like we have a saddle library which has over 150 models. People love testing saddles, as you can see in the picture, and this gets us great results, as you can see through our Google reviews. So if you're here, you've likely been experiencing some of these kind of things. So if you're a committed rider, you'd be training hard. Training hard is never like a hard thing for people, or especially triathletes, to do. But maybe you've got to this kind of performance plateau. Maybe you're trying to figure out, how can I get to that kind of next level? Or if you're getting sidelined by aches and pains all the time, then yeah, is it my bike that's kind of affecting me? Is it my body? What is it? Like, every time you get on the bike and getting some aches and pains, then yeah, there's probably something in that. And especially maybe it's okay when you're kind of riding for a little bit, but as you start to increase that volume or intensity, if you're constantly kind of getting those injuries and they start to creep in every time you just start to kind of ramp things up, then yeah, there's probably something in your bike fit that could be improved. And this is what I'm trying to give you tonight. So it's that kind of knowledge and a bit of expertise, so you can kind of start to investigate things. So if you don't know what's holding you back, then yeah, stick around. You'll be you'll get a ton of information. And if you're new to bike fitting and you just want to learn a little bit more and find out like how could this actually kind of benefit me, then yeah, this is what kind of the stuff that we're going to delve into. And I'm going to give you some really actionable, simple stuff that's going to make your riding so much better if you can get it right. And yeah, like these are some of the things that we often see all the time. Everyone's like kind of trying to figure it out, trying to kind of go through their problems. And more often than not, you've been trying to buy your way to a little bit more performance, buying power meters, getting more kit. Maybe you've been trying some DIY bike fitting as well. There's so many like little tools out there, like kind of apps, which seemingly can give you the answer. If you're looking for more performance, then you've probably been trying to get yourself a little bit more aero. It's very trendy these days, try and get a little bit more aerodynamic. But if you've been injured, then you've probably been doing a bit of physio work or those boring core exercises that everyone tells you you should be doing and you feel like you ought to be doing. And maybe even a bit of yoga if you're a little bit more adventurous, or trying to solve everything by watching all the YouTube gurus and all that, binge watching the GCN channel and all that kind of stuff, or copying your club mates, or maybe even like, I don't know, like if you're a little bit too confused and you've consumed a bit too much information, then some people just don't know what to do. So maybe you're not doing anything at all. So I'm going to see if I can cut through some of this kind of misinformation, kind of boil it down to some simple stuff that you can kind of take away. And yeah, if you've been going through all that kind of stuff, then you might be ending up feeling a little bit like this, which I think my daughter is feeling a bit like that right now. So, end of the school day. So yeah, let's get into some of the practical and actionable information. Now, before we get into it, like I've been bike fitting since 2008, and so there's over 10 years of information that I can try and distill into you, but I'm definitely not going to be able to get through all of it tonight because there's just a lot of knowledge there. But if you can just take away kind of like one thing from what I kind of give you tonight, I guarantee you that it's going to make a difference to your bike riding and so on. So I'm going to try and break it down into, firstly, a lot of you who have gone through the bike fit process and so on kind of will understand the benefits of bike fit, but it's always good to kind of recap that. And then the 5 foundational principles behind our method. So every bike fit is slightly different. We're a bit like chefs, or going to restaurants. Like everyone wants to cook you a nice meal, but everyone goes about it in a slightly different way. So I want to give you our flavor. And our kind of what kind of guiding principles there are and the values that we hold when we go through our bike fitting, and then onto the kind of meat and potatoes of like the 10-step process. That's the kind of process that you can implement and take away with you, and then hopefully we'll have enough time to kind of really get into some of the questions that you've all been wanting to ask. So before we get on to that kind of 10-step process, we need to set the scene. And this is just getting into the benefits of bike fit. And no doubt, if you are looking for a bike fit, like everyone will be looking for a balance of one of these 3 things. And you need to a good bike fit will give you all of these three things: so speed, comfort, and efficiency. But depending on what you want to do, what your riding goals are, then the balance will shift towards one or the other. So if, for example, if you're Fabian Cancellara up there at the top right-hand corner doing time trials at the Olympics, then your priority is going to be speed. You want to eke out as much speed as possible in that hour that you're racing, and maybe you're willing to compromise a little bit of that comfort and efficiency. But you go too far down that road and things are not going to turn out that well. They're all related. And similarly, if you're kind of going for a multi-day kind of like long distance bike packing trips, then probably you want to prioritize that comfort because you want to be enjoying your day, bike day after day. And so speed doesn't become as essential. And so you can shift that balance around. And this is the kind of magic part of like kind of bike fitting, just kind of understanding and figuring out where we can kind of shift that kind of balance and priority. And as you kind of these kind of benefits are all physiological benefits. These are kind of things that will come out of your body. But at the end of the day, like, you want to be enjoying your bike and you want to have confidence in your bike riding, and ultimately you want autonomy over your bike fit. You want to be in control of your body, of your bike riding. And so if you can kind of understand your body and understand your bike fit, then you're going to be able to kind of engage in all of the kind of benefits of the bike fit. And interestingly, this reminds me of a story with a bike fit colleague of mine when we were both working back in kind of bike stores and selling bikes, as well as kind of dabbling in a bit of bike fit, not really knowing what we were doing. But Tony was a little bit ahead of me, and so he wanted to experiment. And so he would, when he got a new customer in, he would set up two bikes, and he would get like a super fancy high-end, like back then in those days, like £5,000 was a lot of money for a bike. So he'd get that £5,000 bike, but he would set it up in a terrible position. And then he would get the £500 bike off the shelf and set it up in a really great position for that rider, and then send them out on their way and get them to test ride the bike. And 99% of the time, the people on the well set up bike would come back and be like, "This bike was amazing. I really want this bike. This is like so cool. Yeah, this other bike, yeah, the braking was a little bit better, the shifting was a bit better, but this one, just there's something about it that just felt really amazing." And just going through back in that day, I didn't really kind of realize the significance of it, but kind of thinking back now, it's just kind of a really good illustration of how important bike fit is to the overall package of kind of what you're trying to achieve on the bike. So moving on to our 5 foundational principles. So these are the kind of values that we kind of put forth through all of our bike fitting. And strangely enough, the first one is like bike fit is actually pretty simple, because we're dealing with bikes, and bikes are limited. There is only a certain amount of adjustment that you can make with a bike. So you can put the seat up, you can put it forward, you can put it back, tilt it, handlebars, but there is only a limited amount that you can move a bike around. And so there's a limited amount of possibilities within bike fit. So yeah, bike fit essentially is simple. However, we want to strap a human being onto this kind of limited machine. And this is where it gets a little bit more complicated, because human beings, unfortunately, are pretty complicated. All of you out there are unique. There is not another Kriss Handy sitting in this webinar right now who is exactly the same as the Kriss Handy I'm looking at right now. So this is where we have to get a little bit more kind of cognizant, I guess, of the human in front of us and how that human functions, and how do we get this complicated human being strapped to the simple bike. And so can we accommodate this complicated human with the limited amount of adjustment that we have within the bike? And so bike fit is an interaction between kind of bike and human, but is also a human-to-human process. You know, a bike fitter is there like a coach to help guide the rider through the process, and we have to do it together. Just on a really simple term, like whenever we get a rider in, we just kind of make sure that they understand that I, as a bike fitter, have no idea really what that rider is feeling when they're sitting on the bike. Like, is the saddle comfortable? Is it uncomfortable? I don't know. I can't feel what your butt is feeling. So this is where I have to kind of ask, and we have to figure out and kind of find ways of communicating to understand kind of how you're feeling. So how a rider is feeling is very, very important. But at the same time, a rider cannot see what they're doing on the bike. And this is where, you know, what feels good might look terrible, and what like looks great also might feel terrible. And so there's a back and forth that needs to take place where kind of rider and fitter have to kind of take kind of have to work together to kind of come up with a solution. And in this case, like, bike fit is not absolute. And I think this is where some of the information has been lost along the way. Because bikes are simple and are limited, the idea was that, you know, if we just, you know, measured some things and put the bikes in a certain position, then, you know, that will be it. But we forget about the human being. And so there is, a bike fit is not kind of exact in that you have to have your bike fit or your saddle height at, you know, X height to the millimeter, and you can't deviate from that. We all know as human beings we're changing all the time, and the simplest form, we're getting older all the time, and that is inevitable. And if a bike fit is simply just a reflection of kind of how our body is or how it's performing and its capabilities, then it's always changing. Our bodies are always changing. Even, you know, in the morning when you get up, you are taller in the morning than when you go to bed at night, just through the sheer force of gravity. If you don't believe me, try it out. Go to bed tonight, measure yourself, get up in the morning, measure yourself, see what happens. Let me know as well, email me, I'd love to know. So the most important thing to realize is, like, yes, human beings change, and so bike fit can also change too. And most importantly, you should own your bike fit. And this might jar with some people, and we might not be the best kind of fit kind of bike fitters for people who want to be told, this is your position, this is it, go away, deal with it. We're very much, again, about this collaborative process and people understanding themselves, understanding their bodies, how that bike can kind of work around it. And with that knowledge, then you can kind of start to manage the changes as you go through your life cycle of being a cyclist, being a triathlete, whatever it is. Like, if you understand yourself, then you can understand your bike fit and you can start to own it. I really don't want to be like there, like kind of telling people forever for the rest of their cycling life what they're going to do. Like, I want people to kind of understand and grow and learn and kind of take charge of their bike fit. So we're always here as kind of guidance, but yeah, you should definitely own your bike fit. And that goes back to that kind of autonomy that you want in your bike riding. So the overall message is knowledge equals power. Literal power, in terms of like Mark Cavendish down here. Like, he was he was never the fastest bike rider just because he was the strongest or kind of most powerful, but he is the smartest kind of rider. So, you know, we can take that kind of analogy into our bike fitting, and the more you know, then the better decisions you can make. And yeah, so this is what we want to try and give you guys. All right, so let's get into the details then. This is the, oh, I think I missed one. So this is the 10-step process that you've all been waiting for. Now, if you follow this kind of chart, this is basically the accumulation of over 10 years of kind of like bike fitting, this is the method that we follow. This is the process. So you start from number one, work your way around the circle. Seems pretty obvious. And if you do follow this kind of methodology all the way around, you will get to a good bike fit. And you essentially start from the ground up, starting from like fleet position, moving on to saddle height, cockpit height, and cockpit width, saddle setback, all the way. And then you get to number 10, which is testing. And this is a critical part of it, of the process. There's a reason why the process is circular, because it never ends. Testing is essential. Like, you will never know if your bike fit is any good if you don't go and ride your bike and test it and spend some time on it and see how your body adapts and figure out, you know, was it good? What was good? What was bad? Can I change something else? And then you come back and go through the process again and, you know, make tweaks and make tweaks kind of with knowledge, having made some notes and having kind of thought through that kind of process. And so we go through the cycle again. So I know that there's an awful lot of information in this kind of process. So what I'm going to do, and because I've had a lot of questions about this already, I'm actually going to get into more detail and break down just kind of one section of this 10-step process. And I'm going to go into saddle height. And again, this is going to be more detailed, so you can take this away and you can start to action it and kind of get your saddle height right. Mainly because saddle height is the one thing that 80% of people that come into our bike fit studio have not got right. And if you kind of follow through and you go out tomorrow and start looking around at the riders that you go past, you're going to be like, oh my goodness, I need to tell this guy they've got the saddle height wrong. But don't do that. I tried to do that, and yeah, people don't like being told that the saddle height's wrong. But it's actually no fault of our own. It's just a physiological thing. We're not built to ride bikes. We are built to run. And so I can get into this a little bit later. I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent, but essentially when we run and we walk, we go through a process called triple extension, which is extending our hips fully, extending our knees fully, also extending our foot fully as we go through that kind of gait cycle. Unfortunately, we don't do that when we're on the bike. We kind of get stuck in this circle, so our legs never extend kind of fully. And so whenever we get on the bike and we get into the right saddle height, we actually feel like we're a little bit too low. We feel like we've got more to give. But in order to stay in control of your pedal stroke, to stay smooth and supple and be able to produce good power all the way around instead of like in a really jerky kind of way, then we actually need to sit the saddle lower than our potential kind of gives. So that's the main reason why most people have their saddle height too high, because they're trying to run essentially and do the human thing. But actually we want to be bike riders. Oh, went the wrong way. Okay, so let's get into saddle height. So again, this is a 10-step method, and again, follow this method. I can share the slides and stuff at the end, so you guys can take this away and try and get it right and so on. But this is the detail, and this is exactly what we do in our bike fits as well. So step number one, you can set your bike in a trainer and get it level. So it might sound really obvious, but you know, if you're doing anything with bike fit, if you're doing any indoor training or anything, just level your bike. Like if your bike's not level in the trainer, then you know you're either going to be riding uphill, going downhill. You're not going to get kind of accurate results. So make sure your bike is level. So you can do that with spirit level, or like there's a few other kind of like different methods you can use. They're all very simple. Use tape measure the axle height at both ends. Actually, we've got a blog on our website which you can kind of go through this kind of method as well. Number two, now this is an interesting one that you might not have thought of, is you want to set a consistent measuring point for your saddle. So a lot of people measure saddle height and they're like, well, I'll just measure it to, you know, the top of the saddle, maybe at the middle of the saddle. But what happens if you change saddle? what happens if your saddle's a different shape? And so again, will be a really, really good takeaway for you so that you can establish, this consistent measuring point, and then you can actually get consistent results if you've got multiple bikes or so on, or setting up different bikes or hiring bike, things like that. And what we use is a width measurement. So you have a look at the calipers, and we find where the waist of the saddle is 80 millimeters wide, make a mark in the middle of the saddle using a bit of tape. And that is the point where we will take any measurements from. And you can find that kind of width measurement on any saddle. So yeah, even if it's a different shape, it's a lot longer or a little bit wider, then yeah, use that kind of 80 mil kind of measuring point for all of your measurements. And that will give you consistency, and other measurements will kind of tally up. So good little tip for you. Okay, once you've got your train set up and your bike measured, so you kind of measured your seat height and you've recorded it, so you know your baseline, then you're going to get on your bike and you're going to ride, 6 or 7 out of 10 effort. So, it's like kind of club ride pace. You're going long. You can talk, but you're going to run out of breath a little bit in a little bit. And once you get to that point and you've kind of established a little bit of feeling, you understand where you are, what it feels like to be at your current height at that kind of intensity, you're going to drop your saddle to where it's obviously too low. So just, it's going to feel like you're riding a kid's bike. And you want to observe kind of what you're feeling, what muscles are working, what's going on, which muscles are kind of really having to overwork and which muscles aren't kind of working. And you will find that it just feels terrible. It just feels like you're having to work way, way more than you need to. And more likely your quads are going to be burning, so top of your thighs is just going to be really overworking because you can't extend your legs fully. So like back of your legs, the hamstrings just can't do the work that they need to. So now that you've established a low point where you're obviously too low, where you don't want to be, you can start raising the saddle in small increments. Usually I go 5 mil. If it's the first time you've done it, you can do it 10 mil at a time. Use the kind of guides that you have on the back of your saddle, seat post. So some seat posts will have like kind of markings on there, which would be really useful. But as you raise it, kind of mark it off with a pen or a bit of tape and so on. But it's really important that you stay in the same gear. And as you raise that saddle up, observe kind of what happens to your body. Now, if you feel a change of effort and you haven't changed gear, then we know that something biomechanically has changed. And usually the closer we get to your ideal, the smoother, the easier, the more fluid, the more powerful you're going to feel. And that's kind of where you want to work towards. You want to kind of just keep raising it and get to that point where you're starting to really kind of get into the flow of it. And yeah, where your ideal is, as I just said, is just going to be where you're smooth and controlled and powerful and pretty stable. So you can see this lady here. Yeah, she's pedaling pretty smoothly. A little bit of movement through the hips. There's always work to be done, but she's pretty stable. And so this is kind of what you want to be kind of like aiming for. But you want to go too far. So now that we've gone too low, we've kind of got to maybe where you found ideal is. You want to go too far. You want to go too high and establish that kind of limit point. So essentially what you're doing is trying to teach your body where your limits are. So you've gone too low, kind of going somewhere in the sweet spot, and then you're going too high. And once the body learns, it will kind of know where you want to be. It will learn, it will remember kind of where too high is. You've experienced it. And too high is kind of where your hips are rocking around. You're not in control of that pedal stroke anymore. Your body's having to compensate. Pedaling just feels harder again, and you're having to stretch out. You're not in contact all the way through that kind of pedal stroke. So again, just a nice little example of the same lady here who was sitting a little bit too high. So once you found that kind of position which is too high, then you can bring it back to the ideal. So we've got a little example here of Alps, who was in the studio a few months ago. So he came in on the left-hand side, and then the position on the right is kind of where he kind of went out. But he is sitting way, way, way too high on the right-hand side, really rocking around, shoulders up by his ears because he's having to brace his body, and a little bit smoother here on the right-hand side. So again, just to recap, you need to find the low point, you need to find your upper limit point, and then you can kind of bring it back to that kind of midpoint or ideal in between. And then once you've done that, then you need to test it a little bit more. So you'll find that testing is definitely very much part and parcel of our process. So now that you need to ramp it up to 8 out of 10 effort, put it into a harder gear, and retest with finer adjustments so you can kind of really dial in that kind of seat height. Because as you push harder on the saddle, on the pedals, your body will operate slightly differently. You'll tend to drop your heels a little bit more. So usually people will find that they need to kind of drop their saddle just a few mil to get that kind of real kind of like optimum once you found that kind of ideal, and then retest. And again, with Alps, you can really see his hips rocking around on the left-hand side as his body is trying to stay in contact. It's trying to create that power, but it can't do that. But you can see how much more stable he is on the right-hand side as he's able to kind of operate his legs more efficiently. And then you got to take it outside and retest it. And yeah, the cycle kind of starts again. So, you know, what happens when you go outside? Different things may change. You may do more riding, you may do less riding. Your muscles may lengthen, they may shorten, all these kinds of things. So you just got to kind of keep testing and refining and just kind of checking in with your body. And this is kind of the kind of critical thing. I think everyone's trying to kind of hack their way to the right kind of seat height or right bike fit. They want like an algorithm, they want a formula, something, you know, multiply your inseam by 0.883 and that will give you your seat height. It's like humans don't work that way. Humans work like out in the real world. They work like you know, as they work, you know. So you have to look at yourself as an individual, not as an algorithm, not as a formula, not as an equation. And you need to go about it and test it. So if you have a testing protocol like this, then you can go systematically through it and figure out what your body likes. What does it respond to? And we literally had this like kind of last night. We had a guy back in for a tri bike fit, and we set him up. We went and bought the bike, brought it back again, but he had a free bike fit from like the place that they kind of bought the bike from. And the guys just set his saddle way too high. And they thought they put him in like the kind of average kind of range. But what they didn't know is this guy had like, you know, a hamstring ACL tear. And so, you know, his hamstrings are just way shorter than normal. So he can't extend his legs enough as possible. So it's not this guy in the picture, but just someone else. And so he rides with a slightly lower than average seat height. And so you have to take all of that into account when you're kind of looking at individuals. So just replay this again, just a classic example of someone who sits way too high and back into their kind of functional range. So just a quick recap. Again, I'll send you over this kind of slide so that you can kind of action this as we go. And really important to note that this method that I've just described to you, this is science. This is how science works. And I think everyone gets a little bit blinded by thinking that science is just technology. It's just lasers and you know, things that measure things and blinky lights. But science is actually a method. Science is having a hypothesis, creating a method, going out and testing it, and then seeing if you can recreate it, retest it. Can you prove it? Can you recreate it and redo it? And then what's the conclusion? Was it a good? Did we get good results? If not, right, let's go back in and retest and redesign the experiment. And this is kind of what you need to do. You need to be scientific about your bike fit. You need to be scientific about how you test. You need to be, you can take ownership of this. And, you are the person that knows yourself the best, not some kind of algorithm that tells you your knee angle has to be 145 degrees at, bottom of the pedal stroke. Who knows? This is why like bike manufacturers don't tell you, you are definitely a medium. They kind of give you a very vague kind of range in which maybe if you're between 5'7" and 6 foot, this bike might fit you. They can't say with any kind of exactness that that's going to be the right bike for you. So yeah, own your bike fit, figure out yourself. And again, just going through the cycle of bike fit again. So bike fit never ends, but you can get to a pretty good place. So just get into the habit of fitting yourself, adapting, testing, refining. And you don't have to be kind of doing this all the time, but it might be just like the rest of your training and kind of what Kriss does with his athletes. It's periodized, it's seasonal, but it's good to kind of check in with your body and anything, any way your body is kind of working. And yeah, this is kind of, if you go through this kind of process, then these are the kind of results that you're going to get. Like understanding people and figuring people out is kind of what we do. And the most common kind of like feedback we get is often people saying, "Oh, I really wish I'd done this earlier. I wish I'd known. Like, I've just been wasting all this like kind of time, like pedaling in a position that wasn't quite so good." So yeah, get on it. Start kind of figuring out your bike fit. Start owning it, and I think you'll get a lot out of it. So I think I've been waffling on for far too much. I've always got way too much to say. So we're going to see if we can get into some of the questions. Hopefully some of the questions that you asked, there's a lot of questions about seat height in the questions that you submitted. So hopefully some of that will be answered in that kind of presentation that I just gave and that kind of method through kind of setting your own seat height. But yeah, let's open it out to the floor. I see the chat has already exploded a little bit. So how should we do this? Should we see if there's anyone want to speak live?
Well, Wade, do you want me to jump through a few of the questions that were sent in?
Yeah. Okay, let's do that then. Yeah.
I'll do that. Shall I?
Yeah.
First one, can you describe what proper arch support should look and especially feel like? What should the rider feel at the feet?
Okay, so yeah, feet, we could go on all day about feet. Actually, I've got some arch support here for you. These are probably some of my favorite kind of arch supports in here. Essentially what you're trying to do with arch support, it's a bit like in a skiing boot. You're trying to map the shape of your arch with the insole. And cycling is very much unlike running, where you are kind of like bending your foot and kind of walking, where you bend your foot and your foot is dynamic. So you generally don't need arch support if you're kind of going through, if you're running and walking. But because your foot is flat and locked into, usually if you're kind of road cyclist or so, and you're locked into kind of a hard, flat surface, then your foot is just kind of pushing down. It doesn't bend. And so your foot kind of has to retain its kind of shape in order to push down effectively. If your kind of arch decides to collapse whilst you're kind of pushing down, then your knee's going to follow, your hip's going to follow, and so on. So we generally like to have, I like to describe it as giving your feet a hug. So you want that kind of arch support just to kind of hug the arch, so that your foot kind of knows where it is in space. It's more of a proprioceptive kind of input. So your foot kind of understands that there is kind of support underneath it and it knows where it needs to be. Otherwise, if you've got that kind of big kind of gap underneath your arch, then the foot will just try and move into it. So yeah, that's hopefully that gives you a pretty good idea. So play around with some arch support.
Okay, next question. Is there a rider that always feel excessive pressure on their hands, whatever you do? What are the contributing factors? So is there a riding position that always feels excessive pressure on the hands? Maybe that's what they're asking. What are the contributing factors?
Well, when you ride a bike, you do have to lean forward. So you do have to put some weight onto your arms. But you can choose how much weight you want to put on your arms. So this is much to do with center of gravity, where your center of mass is on the bike. The further forward you sit on your saddle, then the more mass you're going to put onto the handlebars. So you're going to feel more weight. The further back you sit, then the less weight you're going to feel. The more upright your handlebars, maybe you might feel a bit less weight. But pressure on the hands is, there's so many factors that go into it. If your handlebars are too high, you're going to feel more pressure on the hands. If they're too low, then you're going to feel more pressure on your hands. If your hoods are positioned incorrectly, you're going to feel pressure on the hands. So you have to kind of look at it all holistically. But usually it's something to do with your weight distribution on the bike. So how far forward and how far back your saddle is positioned relative to your feet. But yeah, if you're feeling a lot of pressure on your hands, it doesn't have to be that way. Core strength also, like, how strong you are. Can you maintain your kind of like lean forward? Okay.
Mary, she had a bike fit at some point recently, but she gets severe pain across the back of her shoulders. And even with her new TT bike, which was made to those measurements, but she still gets the pain. She says she's short, 156, has short cranks and handlebars.
Okay. Come get a bike fit.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Sometimes it's questions to be answered, and sometimes it's a reassessment potentially. Yeah.
Yeah. You need to get a reassessment, and it's really important. I find if you've had a bike fit from someone and it wasn't maybe quite perfect, go back to them. Go back and speak to them. Like, they are the best person to understand you and your situation. Like, they've done stuff with you and they should have guided you through a process and understood you, and you should have made some decisions together. And they will kind of have made those decisions for particular reasons.
Yeah.
And then they sent you out the door, and then you got to test it. And maybe that experiment didn't work. So you need to go back and be like, okay, that didn't work. So can we move in a different direction? And if they're a willing kind of participant in that, then yeah, absolutely, they should be able to kind of help you through that kind of process. So, it's not just kind of one and done. It's not formulaic. It's, it's a process. So keep talking to your fitters, keep talking with your practitioners.
Couple of questions here on saddle height, how to adjust it correctly. I think you've kind of covered that pretty well with those guidelines, with the points there. What do you use to accurately adjust cleats?
Okay. So I wish I had the tool here with me today. There's a great little cleat tool by a company called Ergon. Essentially, it's so simple. It's like it's a board with a cutout of the shape of the cleat, and it's got some lines on it, ruler measurements on it, and you just literally slip your kind of shoe with the cleat on over the top. Hey, Scott, very good. If everyone can see Scott's screen, that is exactly the tool.
Hold it up, Scott. There we go. Let's bring him up.
Yeah. So they are specific to kind of each kind of cleat, but it's a super simple. You can even try and make one yourself. Like, you just need a cutout of your cleat, which you can kind of fit your kind of shoe and cleat onto, and then you can kind of start to gauge kind of how much rotation, how much fore-aft there is, and so on. Yeah, have a look on our kind of knowledge hub on the website. There's a few kind of links to kind of those tools, but yeah, super easy. It's like 20 quid for a tool, and yeah, you can take it everywhere with you. Super simple.
Scott, whilst we got you here, mate, how long do you spend on each measurement? Scott asked, how long do you spend on each measurement?
Through I'm assuming that's like kind of going through the 10-step process.
Yeah, so it was when you were doing all the different measurements of saddle height, and you were saying obviously 5 mil of each one. So how long would you? Was it? Are we talking 2 minutes of that, and then try the next one? Try the next one. Or would you go longer?
Yeah, so I would just ride for as long as you can get a good gauge of kind of how that kind of particular height feels. Like, can you feel a difference? Can you not? And then kind of move on to the next one. Sometimes you need to go back. Sometimes you don't know what it feels like when you get to one position until you go back to the previous one and you retest it and you're like, oh, actually, no, the previous one was better. Okay, let's retest it. So you just need to go back and forth, back and forth. And the more times you do it, the more information your body has and the better decisions then it can start to make. So just keep going through it. There's no
trial and error. Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Got a question from Darmid about the effect of different shaped manufacturers' hoods on wrist discomfort. So again, we've got that wrist discomfort. I've actually got two other questions here about wrist discomfort, about pressure and things. So different shaped hoods.
Yeah, so yeah, like there's a lot of different like kind of hoods out there. Like every manufacturer is different. Even within manufacturers, there's different shapes and so on. You just got to take a kind of practical view on it and kind of understand how your hand feels on a certain hood, and then kind of, if you can, try it out against, another hood. Like some.
Can I ask you live, Wade? I'm here, so I could ask you the question live. That's me.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure.
Hi. So I set up my own bike using your fit measurements from previous bikes. We corresponded a bit about it at the time.
Yeah.
I've got it really close. But the only thing that troubled me was I was going over from Shimano mechanical to SRAM Di2, much bigger hood.
Yeah.
I measured absolutely everything. So I measured the decline from the saddle tip to the hoods. I put a spirit level on it. I got the same angle on both bikes. I measured the height of the hood from the floor. I mean, I measured everything I could, but I felt that the shape of the hood was such that my wrist was in a different position when I was on the hoods, and I started getting wrist pain. And some of that might be because the hoods were not evenly set up and one had slipped, but even once I got them back to level with the spirit level, I still had some wrist discomfort. And as far as I could see, I'd set everything up on the measure.
Yeah. Where did you feel it on the wrist?
So let's see. So
back of the wrist.
I don't know if you can see my hand on.
Yeah.
So like when you've got your hand on the hood like that, you're feeling here.
Okay. Yeah. So usually that's when your kind of wrist is too kind of cocked upwards.
Yes, exactly.
You're kind of like putting the weight into the kind of groove and wrist rather than spreading it out across the rest of the palm. So it may be to do with if your hoods are angled a little bit too far up, then that will happen. It could be that you might need to change the height of your handlebar, the whole cockpit itself. Like you could try kind of lowering it and just seeing if that allows your wrist to kind of settle back into that kind of more handshake position rather than cocked out.
Yeah.
Like you just need to experiment a little bit. You could also experiment with like kind of how your hoods are kind of tilted. If you're looking from above, like kind of how angled in or out they are.
Yeah.
Like if you have them too angled outwards, then you're gonna kind of splay your kind of wrists a little bit. If you kind of angle them in a little bit, because your wrists are designed to like kind of rotate inwards, then usually most riders will want like a slight kind of inward kind of like hand. So go play with it. You'll be like, don't get too hung up on the measurements. Like play with it. So you see what your body. I know there's reassurance in measurements, but like play with your body. Like go for it.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Appreciate the input, guys. We've got one from KK. What could be the issue if the seat height is correct? Feels good pedaling, but still feel heavy on the hands and neck. I think. Well, what do you reckon?
Yeah, that's probably a weight distribution thing again, or cockpit position. If you got seat height right, then yeah, like time to play around with the cockpit position. So going back to the 10 steps that I kind of outlined, and you want to use that kind of method that I outlined in the setting up your seat height with all of the 10 steps throughout the kind of bike fit process. So it is a very simple level of like trial and error, but it's really kind of comparative testing, we call it. So you move your handlebars a little bit too high, a little bit too low, a little bit further forward, a little bit further back, and just see how your body responds. But yeah, you got to test it. You got to get scientific with it.
Here's a good one from Taylor. Would you expect a rider who is bike fitted for ultra distance to have to change anything on their bike for taking on something like cycling Everest? Anything specific? Any specific things to think about to make it a better experience? Good.
I think yes, Taylor. I think I've been asked to kind of write a whole blog article on this, so I may answer it on this. Yes, there are some very specific things that you can do if you want to prioritize certain aspects of it. If you're Everesting, then you're going to be going uphill for a long time, but also going downhill. So you need to figure out, like, do you want to prioritize uphill comfort or downhill comfort and confidence going downhill? Or do you want to stick with just kind of what you want, what you know?
I was thinking about the uphill and like how to be most efficient, and like I guess the biggest worry is knee pain and niggles coming up with like 24 hours of assisting.
Yeah. Okay. So so if you're going uphill, your saddle goes from like here to being like this. Okay. So at the same time, your body is kind of tipping backwards. So your natural inclination would be to kind of push your body forward. So you're going to be sitting up against like the front of your saddle kind of more. So actually you're going to be, a lot of knee pain comes from discomfort at the saddle because your body knows that it doesn't want to squidge all the like important bits there. So it puts all the pressure onto the knees and legs to kind of hold your body up. So you could just change your saddle position. So if you know your saddle is going to go up like this, then you may want to just drop the nose of the saddle a little bit. So when your saddle is level, then like, you know, when you're riding level, your saddle nose is going to be a little bit down. So you're going to compromise like the comfort when you're going on the flat, but when you're going uphill, it's going to feel a little bit better.
Cool.
Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, no, that's a really good tip. And yeah, we could talk about it more.
Yeah. Well, there's a few more other little details and stuff like that. So yeah, you can balance it out. But yeah, give it a try. Like it only just needs to be like a little bit, like a couple of degrees or so. If you go too far again, like if you go downhill and your saddle is pointing like this, and you go downhill again, like you'll kind of unbalance yourself, kind of going downhill. So you have to remember that what goes up must come down.
Cool. Thank you, Wei.
No worries. All right.
Yeah, I think we've got a couple more here, Wei, and you won't be able to get all through all of them because there's a fair few.
Yeah, I know. So many.
It's all good though. It's all some really good stuff though. I think anything long distance, ultra, or extreme like that, then that's always going to be a bit complex, isn't it? Let's go. If changing shoes or pedals to something with a slight difference in stack, is it just a case of raising or lowering by whatever the difference is? If changing shoes or pedals to something with a slight difference in stack, is it just a case of raising or lowering by whatever the difference is?
Yeah, just assuming you got your cleat position in the same place, then yeah, just raise and lower the saddle as appropriate and retest. Like see what happens. Yeah, I think it's as simple as that.
Yeah. How would you determine the right saddle tilt to angle? So I guess that's on the flat. I mean, you're talking about saddle height, saddle tilt,
Yeah.
but I guess that's on the flat, wouldn't it?
Yeah, most saddles I would recommend people to start with like kind of level like this. So like the middle portion where you sit is kind of level. It can be a little bit complicated when like certain saddles have like a little slope down like this, but you kind of want to start with like the middle part where you sit kind of level. It's a bit like you sitting on a chair. If your chair is tilted like this, then you're just going to slide off the front of it. If your chair is tilted like this, you can slide backwards. So start level. And if you feel a bit of pressure at the front here when you're kind of leaning forward, because your body will kind of like lean forward, then you can kind of just angle your nose down very slightly, just a couple of degrees, and just see how that kind of works. But bear in mind that if you go too far, then that's going to unbalance your body and you're going to kind of start falling forward. So essentially your saddle needs to support your body. You want it to be able to sit on the saddle, and that's where you generate your power from. So start level, I would very, very rarely, hardly ever want your saddle kind of nose tilted up, because if you lean forward and your nose is tilted up, then you're just going to squidge all the important bits, and that's just not going to be comfortable.
This last one in the chat from Romain, I don't know if you're there, but you're just asking about two different heights. One being too low, which overloads the quads and disengages the glutes and hamstrings. But then a saddle height 2 helps the glutes and hamstrings, but it's too high, creating more saddle pressure and losing control. So it's trying to find that, which height would you choose almost? But is there a go?
Which one you choose?
Yeah.
I wouldn't choose either.
I don't know if you.
Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? It's like just being in between, where you kind of, one way you're a bit too low, one way you're a bit too high, and so what do you think would be, it's not ideal, but what would be the best of both situations, basically?
Well, if you get to a point like that, then it probably points to the issue being somewhere else, more than likely crank length, because usually that's what people encounter. If like your crank length is a little bit too long, if you sit too low, then it's not going to feel good. But when you sit a little bit too high, then you just can't kind of reach the top of the pedal stroke. So it sounds like it would more be something else, or maybe the saddle setback's not quite right. But generally speaking, if you really had to choose, I would pretty much always choose a saddle height that's a bit too low, because that's going to cause less issues than a saddle height that's too high. Which is why most really novice riders or kind of unconfident riders will tend to sit with their saddle too low.
Yeah, we did. It was someone that was sitting with his saddle way too high. We actually dropped it 35 mil.
Wow.
So I was wondering if it actually was the fact that it was just memory muscle, that it felt too low and it didn't feel like the engagement were happening where it was actually happening, and it was just about getting used to it in a way, or reteaching the body to be in that position.
Yeah, absolutely. The body will remember. It absolutely remembers. And because cycling is such a repetitive sport, you're doing 10,000 pedal strokes an hour, you are ingraining kind of movement pattern, hours and hours and hours. And you guys, who go out and cycle, you don't want to just ride for 1 hour. You're going to be out hours and hours and hours. And so you're just ingraining the same movement patterns over and over and over. So if you've done like millions of pedal strokes, and then you change something and you want to ingrain like a new movement pattern, then the body, absolutely is going to try and hold on to like kind of its learned movement patterns already. So there is always a period of adaptation and testing. So again, like a really, really important lesson in testing. Like you just got to give it some time and see what happens, and then come back to it. That kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it does. That's great. Thank you very much.
Cool.
All right, last question, Wei, please.
Yeah.
If it's all right, my friend. When or how do you decide to change the crank or stem length? When?
When? At 12:32 on. No. Oh, well, it's a little bit too general to kind of get into it. I think usually when people usually change stuff when there's pain. When it gets unbearable, when something's not quite right, so on. If your stem length is too long, then you're going to feel like you're constantly overreaching and you can't stay in control of the controls. So you probably want to bring that back a little bit. If it's too short, then you're going to feel squidged up and just all compressed. So you want to kind of lengthen your cockpits, get into that kind of nice long kind of neutral posture through your spine. Crank length is kind of like similar again, if you're feeling just a little bit I don't know, think about crank length as like kind of turning circles. So, you know, the longer your crank length, the bigger circle you're going to have to turn in your pedal stroke. And it's a bit like walking up multiple flights of stairs. Like, would you prefer to like kind of take, you know, 3 steps at a time and kind of get to the top of the stairs? Or do you go for the shorter crank, which is a bit like taking smaller steps, but more kind of like small steps all the way up to the top of the staircase? So, you know, it may be kind of a bit of rider's preference, but if you're feeling kind of restricted in any way or struggling to kind of complete pedal stroke, then yeah, maybe investigating crank length would be a good thing to do. But yeah, hopefully that helps.
Outstanding way. Thank you, my friends. All right, I think we'll call it a night there, guys. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight.
Yeah.
Any of all the questions that we didn't answer, Wei will be getting back to you. Is that all right, Wei?
Yeah, I will get back to you all. I will probably, seeing as there's quite a lot of them, I might make another video or something like that just to kind of answer through them, or we might do it through our podcast as well. So if anyone hasn't seen it, we run a podcast called Cycling Demystified. Go find it on Spotify, on Instagram. And that's where we can answer all your questions and so on. And yeah, we'll cover all this kind of stuff there. Also, if we've got something new which we're launching as well, which is on by demand, popular demand, we are now launching some online consultations. It's not bike fit, but if people want to get a slightly more individualized kind of response and assessment of their position, I can now offer kind of online kind of assessments. I'll pop a link into the kind of like chat box, so you guys can kind of have a look at it. But essentially, you fill out the form and then you can book yourself in for a kind of call with me via Zoom, and yeah, you can kind of have your kind of bike fit assessed and figure out, you know, where can you make those kind of changes, what might you need to do, and kind of give you a kind of action plan going forward. At the moment, it's $49.99 for that, but I've got a little code for you, so you can get 50% off that. So yeah, I'll drop that into the chat box in a second. But if you guys, yeah, good for like new riders. If you want to just figure out, do I need a bike fit? Do I need to kind of have my position looked at? Or do I need to, you know, if you're a returning rider, you've had a few bike fits, do you want to just check in, just see, you know, is my position still good? You know, yeah, like great little tool for that. And for some of our overseas kind of riders who can't actually come in to see me down in London, yeah, you know, you can get access to me and yeah, all the expertise.
Well, that's the reason we talked about it, didn't we? Because we said that is, with your expertise, we just wanted if there was a way of possibly giving access to your mind and your experience, and obviously because people are making changes to their body because they're doing all their strength and conditioning and all their working on the mobility of the hips and their ankles and the thoracic, they're going to be changing, aren't they, for the better? So yeah, definitely a great option here, guys. So thanks, Wei. Really looking forward to seeing some of the results from it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, if you get stronger, if you start working with Kriss and you suddenly do a ton of strength training, you get really strong, then you're going to need a slightly different bike position. So, yeah.
It's the name of the game, isn't it? We want to kind of continuously improve these positions. So, yeah.
Good stuff. All right.
All right, team. Thanks for everyone for joining us. Click on that link. Make sure you got that link. You'll send it out via email and everything anyway as well. So you'll reinforce.
Yeah, so. Yeah, there'll be a recording of this and then, yeah, we'll send it around.
All right. Nice to meet everyone.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, everyone.
Ciao.
Good night, guys.